So the St. Louis chapter of American Institute of Architects and the Washington University College of Architecture and the Graduate School of Architecture and Urban Design has been, okay, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. What? Yeah, it's good. Okay. Have been intricately linked since the turn of the 20th century, providing an ongoing engagement and support for now well over 100 years. And in recent years, the alumni and friends of the AIA St. Louis have generously supported the samfoxschool, College of Architecture and the Graduate School of Architecture and Urban Design with scholarship support and sponsorship of today's AIA St. Louis Scholarship Trust Lecture, which I will welcome you here today. We're grateful for the engagement in the samfoxschool community and providing the opportunity to bring outstanding professionals in our field to share their expertise with our students and community. And the samfoxschool community would like to thank, in this regard, Carmen Strickland, Grace Corbin, and Robin Ringwald. And please help me to welcome Quinlin Messenger, and who will be introduced today by Professor Linda Samuels, who is the interim director of the samfoxschool, College of Architecture and Graduate School of Urban Design. Thank you.
I couldn't see Petra at all, so I'm going to kind of stand over here so you guys can see me. Hi, Matt and Quinn waving to me. Hi, everybody. So I'm going to start with a story before I actually give you a little bit of bio. And the story starts with a message. So on January 14th, 2021, I sent a LinkedIn message to someone I had never met before, who had never met me before, but I had heard that he was getting ready to lecture at Woodbury University in Los Angeles, and I was like, this guy looks super interesting. So I sent a message on LinkedIn to Quinlin Messenger, and it said, looking forward to your Woodbury talk and hearing more about your work. St. Louis is following along. Come visit us here at WashU. And then 3 months later, Quinn replied and said, oh, I rarely check my messages here. I guess I need to get better at that, which I agree, same, right? And then he said, were you able to join for the talk? I'd love to visit WashU should the opportunity arise. So a couple years, took us a couple years. But that exchange was a really fortuitous way to start what has become a bi-weekly Zoom session. So Quinn and I started Zooming every other week, and then I went on sabbatical, and we continued to Zoom every other week. We got together and entered a competition, and maybe he'll talk about it. We kind of didn't win and kind of won. We didn't win the competition, but they want to do the project anyway. So he might talk about that. We have developed workshops together, and it has ultimately become this relationship that has been really influential on my creative practice and in the way that I collaborate. So Quinn keeps me grounded, he keeps me real and inspired, and it's an honor to have him here at WashU today and tomorrow. So more officially, a little bit of background about Quinlin Messenger. So after 6 years at Y Architects in Los Angeles, Quinlin Messenger founded JUST in 2017. JUST is an umbrella firm that includes 3 interconnected parts: Just Design, Just Collaborate, and Just Act. As a design justice and equity engagement steward, Quinn's leadership and creative identity are rooted in his African American, Native American, and Jewish heritage, which is kind of why I messaged him, because I was like, God, that sounds so interesting. I need to know more. He channels and honors these legacies through design justice, an awareness and healing modality that is at the core of his practice, engaging communities and projects with a sensitivity and focus towards healthy living, social and environmental empowerment, and legacy cultivation. With over 15 years of experience working with underserved communities, Messenger believes design is a tool for social and environmental transformation, and that systems can and should be just for all. Understanding the historical, current, and future context of projects is integral to the firm's process and approach, integrating co-creative and eco-centered practices to address the deepest challenges our communities and ecosystems face. Since its founding, the firm has built such an ecosystem of international collaborators, completed projects, and he has lectured at campuses and conferences across the US. Most recently, in terms of the list of awards that JUST has won, is the 2023 AIA San Francisco Community Alliance Award. So congratulations, and I'd like to just say it's my pleasure to welcome Quinn Messenger to the stage. So thanks for being here, Quinn.
Is this one going? There we go. Hi. Hi. Ah, there we go. All right. Thank you, WashU. Thank you, AIA, for having me here. I'm going to be walking about side to side. And just a few disclaimers. I just drank a lot of caffeine, so I'm pretty wired. Secondly, I just got over being pretty sick, so my voice is likely to crack, and I welcome all jeering, laughing, jokes pointed out. That is likely to happen. And also, if anything you see today on screen or anything that I say or share excites you and you feel like you want to snap, clap, yell out loud, I welcome all sonic contributions. If it's silent the whole time, that hopefully, well, just hopefully that doesn't happen. And maybe before jumping in and talking about Just, I can share a little bit about myself. So I tend to introduce myself through my ancestors, my elders. So above is Ethel May and Leroy, two black folk from Clarksdale, Mississippi, who raised my dad's family in the height of the civil rights movement. Below is my grandmother Judith, who was a Russian Jew who emigrated to the States, fell in love with the ways of the Lakota Nation, was adopted into the Lakota Nation, and facilitated my adoption into the tribe when I was 13 years old. And this handsome fellow down below is my grandfather Jesus, who is an indigenous Yaqui Indian, so indigenous Mexican. I then represent many different walks of life, many different perspectives, and it's something that I really sort of hold and honor in my own sort of design practice, but much of that has come from the inequities that my family has faced through time. And I feel very fortunate and blessed that all four of my grandparents were all activists in their own right and really encouraged me and my family to understand and know that we are all human, regardless of what we look like or where we come from. So in this way, social justice plays a key role in our design practice. My grandmother Judith always shared this quote with me when we were growing up. We are all children of the same mother. I don't want this to... There we go. We are all children of the same mother, and that being Mother Earth. We grew up on the land in New Mexico. This is the Tecosha Institute that was founded by my grandmother about 40 or 50 years ago. Since her passing, we have become the stewards of the land, and on the land we also have a sweat lodge. For those of you who have not had the opportunity to be in a sweat, I strongly encourage you to do so. It is an experience unlike any other. And from my time working under my Uncle Mario, who is an ordained spiritual guide from the Lakota Nation, I've had the honor and privilege of acting as a firekeeper as well as a waterman for our sweat ceremonies. When you're in the sweat, you feel the heat, you hear the songs, you smell the sage, you're on the earth, and you become very aware of your position within the sort of larger ecosystem. But also it gets very hot, and depending on how long you're in there for, you really do start to feel a sense of discomfort. And that is really intentional to help you become in touch with the suffering of others. And in doing so, you also become very aware of your position within this larger ecosystem, and what does that mean for the actions that we've had as a people within and against our shared mother. And in that way, sort of this collective health and well-being for all is where environmental justice plays a key role in my own perspectives. So, I am a firm believer that the future can be just. We have to design it. And that is where the name came from, Just Design. It came to me in a dream, and this preceded the Floyd murder, but after Floyd was murdered, it really did sort of galvanize much of what I was doing, and the team has been pursuing. So within design perspectives, we all have different ways of approaching our work. For designing justice and equity, this is a diagram that we refer to a lot with all of our clients, whether it's a small project, large project, community, private owner. But what we really look to do is acknowledge that within a system there are corresponding mechanisms of oppression that are operating. There's these moments of control that we have to deal with, some more than others. So by helping to sort of elevate awareness and understanding around those issues and around those considerations, we can start to open access and create new pathways, hopefully in providing new tools and facilitating agency. And in doing so, it allows us to equip the communities and the people we are working with to sort of navigate this on their own after we've helped to sort of steward the process forward. So, what does this all mean for sort of today and other perspectives? I love words. I love language. I love the way that people can sort of communicate with intonations and subtle cues. So this is a word that has continued to come into my space, due in large part to my work with Linda Samuels on a project that I'll be sharing with you shortly. But thinking about the word apart. So what is this? It's a specified distance from each other, or in time or space. It's at a distance from the main body, right? Or it's two or more people or things, again, separated by space. But when you actually put space between these letters, it totally changes the nature of how what the word means and what it implies. So when you actually start thinking about a part of something, now we're starting to think about, oh, there's this larger sort of whole, right? And that there's these smaller segments that go into contributing towards that whole. I love this last one here, some but not all of something, right? So just by shifting a letter in written form and the intonation that we use, and when we say the word, it changes the meaning. So we've been doing a lot of thinking about this internally and what it means for our position within nature, Mother Earth. This question you might look at and be like, well, of course we don't believe that we're apart from nature. Like, yeah, we're apart from it. Like, we're in it. But if you think about how we use the word nature, it tends to be this thing that's away from us, right? Like, oh, we want to welcome nature in. Oh, yeah, nature's outside. Oh, I'm going to go out into nature. Well, are we not a part of it? At one point, we were these, maybe, in the cosmos. Galaxies comprised of many different parts. And then we occupy this beautiful blue marble in space. Also, it's our shared mother. She has clouds. These clouds bring health and well-being, shade. The jungles that we have to steward and be responsible for. The abundance of our luscious mother. Her children take many forms. Some not too dissimilar from us. Flocks, but also at times moments with a loved one. She has power. And this power comes through movement, through many different forms, whether it's solid, gas, liquid, like the oceans. Has anyone ever felt alone in space? Maybe we have something in common with the lonely turtle. Or maybe we have something in common with our fellow schoolmates. Communicating through different means of sound and language, but also that transformation that happens through time. Water changing into ice, carving at land, creating new land within the ocean, this merging of hot and cold, the mother that we share in common, finding ways to break out and redefine herself, and taking on geometric forms. And there's evidence of how we started to live and coexist, being one with the land, with each other, taking only what we need to be in balance, finding ways to migrate with the changing weather, the systems, finding ways to be resilient within climates that might otherwise be intolerable to some, seeing ourselves reflected in the work that we do, finding relationships with the planet, not being apart from it, but being a part of it. But then things start to shift. Our relationship to the land is maybe something that's more about industry. How do we start to take care of ourselves at this scale? What does that mean for the care that Mother Earth has given us? What does it mean for wiping out entire sections of forest to get palm oil? Our eggs come from somewhere, but also, while this very uncomfortable image might seem distant to something we're not used to, we do pack ourselves in pretty tight. We build these big ways of getting around. Some thought to be impermanent. It doesn't matter, just tear it down, start over. You know, I always find it amazing seeing these plumes of smoke and chemicals pouring into the sky, oceans on fire. I mean, aren't these the spirits of our ancestors? It's oil, it's ancient beings. Things starting to fall apart. Our animal friends and spirits in need of help, and how it's now starting to affect us, and people becoming more and more aware of what that means, not just through immediate impacts, but hopefully through seeing the impacts on others who might be in communities or places who are not as affluent or have the sort of access to resources. So we need to find a way to move, somewhere else to go. What about these people? Are we apart from them, or are they a part of us? Frantically finding a new home. And, you know, I think sometimes we vilify the planet. Is that a natural disaster, or is that Mother Earth expressing her feelings? So, in thinking about our relationship with Mother Earth, whether we are apart from it or a part of it, what if we believe that we are apart from one another? What does that do? Well, in East Palo Alto, in the Bay Area, where I am based, the Ohlone population were the original stewards of much of this area. And in East Palo Alto in particular, the sort of land stewardship was really acknowledged and held by a wide range of minority groups through time, predominantly African American, but also Asian populations as well. And through time, as East Palo Alto has evolved, it's evolved in the heart of Silicon Valley. So when influx of cash is coming through all of our MacBooks and this genius over here, policy is starting to redline and strike off whole regions of cities. So, as in most cases, freeways and railroadways act as a nice solid red line. And this is East Palo Alto over here. Palo Alto is here, one of the most affluent, rich communities in the country. And just on the other side of the freeway is East Palo Alto, one of the few remaining underserved communities that has vibrancy culturally within the Bay Area. But that extends even further, right? Now East Palo Alto, and has been for the past 3 or 4 decades, is dealing with serious environmental racism. Due to the how cheap land is, we can build these big chemical plants and we can build these big salt mines because it's cheap. But what about the people that are living there? What about all the people that are breathing this? What happens when this thing catches fire and all the chemicals pour into the sky and pour into the earth? That actually happened in East Palo Alto. And on top of that, those inequities show up in the way that policy should be supporting that community. But this community in particular, back in the 80s, while the stereotype is fairly limited and only focuses on one perspective, it was known as the bloodiest city in the country. But the youth, y'all out there who are students showing up, I see you. The youth felt that there was a different life that they could have. So they spoke up. And this big plant that burned down, they wanted to build it again. So they took action and they kicked them out. And there wasn't just that. You know, East Palo Alto has been dealing with a wide range of issues, whether it's water rights, environmental racism, being surrounded by the greatest wealth in portions of the nation. You know, East Palo Alto, 2/3 of it are susceptible to serious flooding in the case of inundations from storms, and it's happening now. At the same time, East Palo Alto is dealing with policy-level issues, food insecurity, this dysfunctional city governance. This one, the history of promises without delivery, is one that has lasting effects on people's psyche and how you relate with one another. So back in 2010, I had the honor of being invited into this community to work with them on a very specific project. It came after 2 or 3 months of serious listening. Before we even got the project, I flew up there and spent weeks, this is when I was in LA, and spent weeks with the East Palo Alto community, learning from them and finding ways to create some sense of rapport. And I met these beautiful people. And this guy right down here, Isaiah Phillips. This is my boy. He's a champion. He's an MC who could show up anywhere, and you feel like you are family. It doesn't matter what you look like or how old you are or where you come from. You are his family. He, in particular, has really inspired much of the reason why I believe engagement is crucial to any design process, regardless of scale. So, what if design process starts to consider the well-being for all? What's possible? In East Palo Alto, my colleague, this funny-haired fellow right here, Gregory, we were in touch with the Ravenswood Middle School District. It's a middle school district in East Palo Alto who predominantly serves the BIPOC population from the community. We had a series of workshops with them. This was our first workshop with the students. We started in there. And as Gregory and I were getting ready to roll things, get going, I turned to Gregory and I was like, this just doesn't feel right. Something's off here. And Gregory's like, all right, well, let's change that. And he just turns and he asks these kids, where do you want to do this? Where do you feel comfortable doing this engagement, this session? And they were like, well, can we go outside? I'm like, sure, let's go out there. So we go outside, and then we started to have a conversation about why did we come outside and not be inside, be in there. Oh, well, being under a tree, the sun, the wind on our face, like I just feel like I'm more connected, and I'm listening, and like my senses are heightened. When I'm stuck inside, I feel sort of shut off. So then Gregory and I started to think, okay, well, we're designing this building for them on their campus. Why don't we take cues from that? What if we start thinking about designing a building that is as much indoors as it is outdoors, and it is as much nature as it possibly can be? So while there was this charge from the students, we also had a very unique charge from this organization, the 8 to 80 Zone. If any of you are 49ers fans from back in the 90s, Jerry Rice, Steve Young, 8 to 80, this is their foundation that they started. The main sort of initiative is to bring BIPOC youth in contact with technology, to start to act as a pipeline to shift the disparity within the tech sphere from sort of representation. So the way they do that is through esports gaming, naturally, because they're football players. But what are we talking about here? It's a middle school campus, and you're talking about bringing esports gaming onto this campus? Isn't esports gaming usually just done in like a dark room that's shut off from the world, predominantly by men and males eating Cheetos? That does not sound like a healthy environment for me to be learning in. So we had to do some work. We kind of had to understand what we were really designing for. They had something in their mind, right? But for us, we saw this as an engine for opportunity, for it to be able to foster fitness at all levels, regardless of your capability. You don't have to be an all-star football player. If you're sitting there and you're writing code, that takes a fitness that I don't have. So we should honor that. That's what's going on here. This should be a building that drives and supports resilience and heals through honoring nature. So while the project had esports center or esports space, robotics, performance, digital arts, production labs, we really saw this as a project to sort of address something very, very important. That at the end of the day, this building is supporting a person. It's supporting the well-being of that person through time. So by doing this and kind of stepping back it gave us an opportunity to start to reframe what we were actually talking about. We had the district, we had the 8 to 80 zone, and we had the students all trying to find a way to sort of talk about this thing. And this is a diagram that we sort of arrived at, thinking about the development continuum of students through time. That this building is not just responsible for now, it's about their physical and mental well-being through time, helping them to develop knowledge-based skills so that they can connect with one another, and also creating new access through exposure. So, what does that mean for an actual building? Well, as a part of JUST, we have a sustainability designer that we work with quite frequently. Her name is Kirsten Weeks. She runs Bio Studio out of the Bay Area, fabulous human. She actually worked on some of our early projects in East Palo Alto, which is how we got to know one another. This was a project in collaboration with Page and Turnbull. JUST tends to partner up with larger firms, and we help to guide not just community engagement, but infuse diversity and equity thinking into the way that projects are developed. So for us, we started to think, well, okay, what if the building is not just an armature for classes to happen? What if the building is also a teacher? Can it also be a part of the faculty and extension? So the building systems were all very much considered to be highly efficient, but also very analog in nature. So given that this is an esports center, this whole center sort of core space has multiple layers of light control, some automated, some controlled literally by pulleys and students, lowering lights and changing the condition in the environment for themselves. In tandem, it's totally net positive energy, and also we had a raised plinth to deal with some of the flooding issues that the site was experiencing, which hopefully will buy this building another 100 to 200 years worth of life. So I really believe that in thinking about projects in this way, we can really start to enable them to do more and be more responsible for the sort of well-being and communities that they support. My boy Adrian Fluent, Mr. Fluent, it's a real person, right? So, how do we do that? I'm this guy up here talking about all these words and strategy, but how do we do that? How can you do that? So we knew that we needed to gather input from a diversity of stakeholder groups. We had multiple ranges we were dealing with. One of the tools that we have developed, it's totally novel to our engagement process, is what we call the shuffle. So part of engagement, a trick that you have to be mindful of is not everybody's an extrovert. Some people have trauma that they might be bringing into the space that might keep them a little bit on their heels. It's sort of being empathetic towards a wide range of experiences. So anonymity can actually be a very powerful tool in engagement because it allows people to share ideas freely and also gives sort of access into ways of thinking. So the shuffle is structured in such a way that everyone gets a blank sheet of paper. And on that piece of paper, everyone has the same 3 questions. And we invite people to answer the first question. Usually there's like really dope music playing in the background and people are sort of bobbing their heads and it feels very vibey. And after you answer the first question, we take all those pieces of paper up, we shuffle them up totally randomly, and then we just give them back out. And then people are asked to answer the second question by reflecting on the first question and the response and highlighting things that are of interest to them. And when you do this a couple times, all of a sudden you start to get this web of thoughts and ideas that are completely anonymous. Nobody knows who said what, but values and goals and objectives start to arise and surface out of that process. And you do it through coalition, but in a very, very subliminal, sort of kind of calm, light-handed way. So we also had to create multiple modes of engagement. I don't know about you, but I've gone to some community engagement meetings and it's like a really unfortunately lit room. It's like tons of fluorescent light and the chairs are horribly uncomfortable and I can't get in the space. So we went to them. We're like, why don't we just do this engagement in a park? Let's just go to where they're comfortable. We also went into people's backyards after we created connections and rapport. And we also, as a result of COVID, have now used online collaboration platforms as in some cases it's even more effective to do it online than it is in person, to also support some of these different modes. What's created out of that is a more sort of stimulated project ecosystem that has a wider sense of diversity of input. So in this project in particular, people were like, hey, I want to be in a space like this, but aren't we designing for esports? Like, how do these two things merge? How do they come together? So we needed to kind of create a clarity of purpose. So we built that awareness of the fundamentals of how it's going to be supporting youth through time, and also starting to identify key agency and access sort of objectives. And in doing so, we ended up with something that nobody had ever imagined. And we did it for the kids and the people that it was going to be supporting. So on this project, the 8 to 80 zone, ways in which we showed up to serve justice through this process. Promoting fitness for all, agency and access, being conscientious, of course, the materials, and questioning at the beginning what it was that we were actually doing. Sometimes it's easy enough to just have a project brief and you just start doing it. But we really sort of took a step back to advocate for the different preferences that people had, which would bring a new life to how this project could be used and seen. That also extended beyond people and went to the planet. So carbon neutral operations, we had a low carbon structure, all heavy timber, mostly renewable. Water-wise, a large majority of water capture off of the roof, and designing for resilience. So these are just some distilled strategies that came out of this process to help move this project forward. Damn. This group of people, and all groups of people, I truly believe, if in our design process we take time to get out of our own ways and let these people guide our way. Not completely, it's not their job. They're hiring us or have brought us in for a reason, but aligning with them in partnership, finding ways to build coalition, not necessarily consensus. Consensus is sometimes like a yes or no thing. It's needed at times, but I think building coalition is something that can be very powerful in our design processes. So, we spent a little bit talking about people and being a part of their community. What if we consider, right, in engagement you have stakeholders. How often do we actually consider Mother Earth as a stakeholder? Usually it's like a consultant that's figuring out how much PV to put on the roof. But what if we give voice and reason and purpose? So, about 2 years ago, after Linda kept badgering me on LinkedIn and calling me and forcing me to do these bi-weekly meetings with her on Zoom, we chased this project in New Mexico, which is where I'm from. We partnered with MIG, they're a landscape architecture firm, national. They have a very unique studio in the Bay Area called the Native Nation Building Studio, and their core focus is advocating and empowering the Native nations of our country. LAGGI's Land Art Generator Initiative. Did I get that right? Is that the right acronym? Okay, cool. And MEA, the Modern Elder Academy, which at first glance feels pretty like a privileged group of people, kind of burner-ish, spending lots of money to talk about this midlife transition. But as Linda and I got to know them better, we kept our own preconceptions in check and found out that we were actually pretty far off. There were some undercurrents, but these people really believed about how can we start to live with the land more responsibly. So they acquired about 200 acres just outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico for their new campus. So this project was quite interesting. While it was a competition, Linda and I took it as an opportunity to really explore our own design processes and what they might mean for this project. One of the key things that we did was in our sort of technical specialists, we had our trusted experts, but we centered Native Nation voices in the actual work. So one of our collaborators was this handsome fella here, Paul Fragua. He's of one of the Native Nations in New Mexico and was a part of MIG's Native Nation studio. So we spent a 2 to 3 day long process on the site, really getting to know the land. So as a part of our sort of consulting partners, we had justice, we had landscape, we had infrastructure and sustainability. All of this was within this sort of axis of the human world, animal world, spirit world, and quote unquote natural world, which in looking back on it, I find quite ironic because this is actually something that came from Paul and MIG, and they have the natural world is something that's separate from the human world. So just a little bit of, sort of reflecting on the fly here. But in our sort of process, in thinking about these 4 different worlds, we went through this sort of orienting, listening, interpreting, designing, and it sort of turned back on itself a few times. But what was really interesting is we got to know these 2 folks here. This fella here, Jan Loeffler-Bird, if there's anybody who's out there advocating for Mother Earth and being a healer on her behalf, it's that guy right there. He specializes in regenerative grazing techniques, which looks at using animals, such as donkeys and horses, to graze landscapes over time in very focused ways to actually regenerate the landscape. I thought it was bullshit. Sorry, I don't know if I could say that. I thought it was BS. But in talking to him, I was like, wow, he's really onto something here, right? You get these horses, you put them in sort of a controlled area. They're going and they're doing their thing. They're turning the soil. They ate some food. The food's got to go somewhere. And they start grazing all the grass down. So then you move them to a different region, set them up, and then that space has now been aerated, water can penetrate, grasses can start to grow, and through time, you can actually regenerate landscapes. The reason why this was important in New Mexico is it was victim, as lots of regions in central United States, of industrial grazing and agricultural sort of techniques. So back in like the 40s, they would just take a train out there in the middle of New Mexico and they would just open up the doors. They would just deploy sheep into the landscape and just let them graze. And then they would get them nice and big and get all their coats off of them, and then they would take them back. And then they would do it again the next year, and they just kept doing it, and it just wiped out the landscape. So this guy was helping to give that strategy. This fella here, he's a rancher. He spends all his time with the horses. He loves the horses. That's Lee. And these 2 together, it's like Batman and Batman. So, what does this mean for this project? Well, when Linda and I showed up on the site, we met Jan, we met Lee, we get in the truck, we're going to drive over to the field to find the horses, but the horses are not in the field. The horses have got out, and they're just roaming the landscape. So we had to fill the truck with a bunch of hay and lure them in back to this holding area. So the way this works is put a post in the ground, and this is an electrified wire that, it's kind of like, I touched it a few times, and it's kind of like, one of those. Nothing too severe, but it's just to keep the animals in a specific sort of area. But this process was really interesting. It gave Linda and I like a real intimate connection with the stewards of these lands, being the animals, and Batman over here. And then, of course, Linda, in all of her glory, color matching without knowing it. So one of the reasons why this was important on this landscape, I had mentioned this sort of overgrazing. What that does is it dries the land out, makes it hard like concrete. So when it rains, the rain doesn't really have anywhere to go. It can't go down. It's like falling on the road. So where does it go? It runs off of the edges, and it starts eroding and cutting the land apart. So Linda and I turned the corner into this place, and we're like, holy crap, this landscape is awesome. Felt like we were on Mars. It was totally otherworldly. And I look at Linda, I was like, we gotta do the project here. This is the site. And Jan comes over and he's like, y'all, as beautiful as that might be, that is a scar on the land. That is Mother Earth telling us that she is sick and we need to help her. So, in our conversations with Paul, who comes from a lineage of people living with the land, we better understood ways of stewarding water. Water is a key resource, of course, that we all need. It makes up a large percentage of our bodies. So what we started to look at was actually indigenous native techniques for managing water on sites and allowing that to inform what the design could be and help to support this sort of regenerative process that they already had going. So we went up on the ridge here. This is Jan here with his AI hands. And we're standing sort of looking back at the landscape. This is us standing over here on Vision Peak. we had options to choose different sites, and while they had sort of said choose one site, Linda and I were like, let's choose 7. Because we really saw this as an opportunity to create sort of an experience for people coming here to take these workshops with MEA, but also starting to show them that you can comprehensively address these issues through land art. So one of the things that was very inspiring to us on the land were these old cholla skeletons. These are, they're not an invasive species, but unregulated, they can just completely take over. But what was really inspiring to us about this was the sort of geometry that was present within. It already had this sort of structure to it. And when we were there, we sort of started talking about Mother Earth and Father Sky, and then Linda starts like feeling really good, and she starts talking about these connections between the two, and then she throws out this word that I never heard before, and she says ground stars. And I was like, damn, I don't know what that is, but I love how that sounds. So we started to look at that more, and we started to think about the fences too. The fences have these posts, right? And this is sort of a regenerative land art project. What if we enhance that process through art? And we take those kind of stinky pink Home Depot posts and we turn them into something that is alive and something that reflects its place. So these were some quick little studies we did by going to REI and buying some LED lights. This is a crystal from my grandma's cabin, and we shoved it in here, and at night we started to document it just to start to get a sense or a feel of how this sort of strategy might feel in the landscape. And then Linda couldn't stop drawing. And I was like, great, keep drawing. So she did. And this is us on the site. There's Linda's hand. And we started to develop this one idea of the ground stars. And this was one of many different strategies, but became sort of the culmination of how we were thinking. So one of the things we looked at was how we sort of orienting to these different points on the site, this sense of sort of stewardship, right? This cosmology of these different points. So there's orienting to the cosmos, there's sort of orienting to the community, and then as you get further and further out into the landscape, it's a bit of a trip to get out there. You kind of have to have the either courage or comfort or will. We started to look at, how can we orient people to this landscape regeneration, these larger ecologies, and then finally, when you get the furthest away from the site, orienting to the self, both in and out. So we did some more sketching. This was done on the site, starting to identify these key areas. All of these areas, you see this sort of edge here. This was a serious place of erosion. So we started to look at these strategies called one rock dams to slow water down before it got to these areas, and then actually creating spaces within the eroded area to slow the water down even more and more, to give it a fighting chance to sort of infiltrate. And then within that, we were like, okay, well, maybe this is where the ground star fields can happen. Maybe they start to happen in some other places. And getting out to Vision Peak to be able to look back and through time, right now this is mostly brown and red, but 50 years from now, after the regenerative strategies have worked and this has been implemented, this is green now, and the elk have come back, and there's herds of antelope, and there's systems that are starting to work together. So this was sort of our illustration that started to come together. We started to think of these ground stars operating in different ways. So some of them were actually thought to just degrade, and we actually embed seeds inside of them so that as they deteriorate apart, they actually start to grow ecology, and our little mice friends start to take parts away, and maybe they're edible. We have habitat ground stars that help to actually encourage specific plant life to grow. Ground stars for reflection, these things that you bump into the landscape that might be bouncing light from the sun. We have our ground star that works with the fence system, all running off of solar and the batteries that they already have. And then our big creature down here is our climate ground star that is helping to send information into the cloud about the height of grasses, how much water is infiltrating, all these different things. So while the landscape looks like this, and we have Lee with his friends, and our friends here, we imagined a future that might be something more like this, where the grasses have started to come back, and those posts have been replaced with an artistic expression of Mother Earth, Father Sky, and these regenerative landscape strategies. So we talked about these moments here to help steward water, slow it down into what's called a zuni bowl. It's an indigenous building technique. But we saw that this is an opportunity to actually create talking circles. And in doing so, water slows down and land starts to regenerate. We thought it would also be a nice opportunity for people to contribute to the landscape. So we have these offering stones, which is actually becoming a part of our continued relationship with MEA. Linda and I are going to be there in May, actually building this first one. And we also had these ideas of these aviaries where you would take all of the dead sort of plants from the riparian zone and you use them to construct an aviary. And within this area, the erosion was very severe, so the sound was very, very strong. It was like a big amplifier. And lastly, sitting with people, water, and seeing ourselves as a part of nature. So, just a few more things here, because I'd love to hear from you all. Hopefully there's questions. If not, I'll start asking you all questions. What if gratitude starts to guide the work that we do? Well, I'm very gracious and full of gratitude for my family, my incredible wife who supports this crazy business and wild idea and dream I have of, serving justice in the world. Thank you, Carrie, and our beautiful daughter, Kaya, our legacy. Thank you. Oh, boy. Yeah. Now we're talking. Prince, my man. Not only the sort of origin of my obsession with the color purple, but very early on, it was Prince, it was Grace Jones. Like that sort of androgynous nature was just my jam. I really got into it. But thank you for being a continued inspiration to me. Thank you to the community of East Palo Alto for showing up in all the ways that you do and in all the ways that you have for my own design process. I couldn't be here without you. And together, we can create a future where we have buildings that are in touch with the landscape, that are net positive, that are collecting rainwater off of the roof and recycling it in toilets, and getting beyond water restriction rights that were put on this community and getting around them and showing them that we could do it with the design and supporting armatures for the creation of art and music. Thank you to the community of San Diego. We worked with the Historic Preservation Committee with the San Diego Community College District to start to design a civil rights center. It's a dream opportunity that I thought I would never have. Thank you for giving us a vision to create a new living archive where your stories are not only honored, but they're alive in the present to inform the future. Thank you to the students. Thank you to you students who showed up today for inspiring us to design buildings that really take into account not just you, but the faculty that supports you and the Mother Earth that supports all of us. So, lastly here, I'm going to leave you with a question. What is possible if we move from being apart from to being a part of? I don't know what that blank is, but I'm curious what that blank might be for you. So I know a lot of times with these speaking engagements, quote-unquote lectures, it can be challenging to stay in touch. So I encourage anyone who does want to stay in touch to take a quick scan of this. Hopefully it takes you to the right thing. It's my marketing coordinator who's in my ear right now. But this is a great way for us to stay in touch and also give you an opportunity to answer the question before. Is it working for people? Is it too blurry? We got a few thumbs. All right, cool. Great. And one other thing. If you haven't had enough of me talking at you, tomorrow we have another engagement. Very excited about. So as a result of the Floyd murder, some brilliant people, someone who is in your ranks, who might be sitting right over there, came together to create the Black Experience in Design. It is a body of essays from all Black identifying designers from various fields, architecture, UX design, landscape, interiors, graphic design, you name it. This book is an incredible canon of thinking about what it means to be designing as a black person. So I will be there. The one and only Panina Laker will also be there. And the editor that I worked with, my brother, Kareem Colley, will also be there. And we are facilitating a workshop that is going to explore design process and what it means for your identity to be present in the work that you're doing. So it will be here in, how do we say this? Keener. It's like the word colonel. Doesn't make any sense. Keener Court, tomorrow from 12 to 3. The stories we carry, stewarding identity through process, so it should be a lot of fun. We're starting with a panel discussion, and then we're going to break into a series of activities to start to craft new frameworks for design process that will hopefully not just inform the work that people are doing that show up, but will also become a part of the archive here at WashU. So with that, the future can be just. Let's design it. I realized I didn't drink anything that whole time.
Thank you so much for the starting lecture.
Yes.
Answer some questions.
Yes, I would love to. If anyone has any questions, thoughts, would love to hear from folks. Yes, here in the front.
Housing is such an issue across the country. How are you working with any groups to address housing for various populations, especially in the red line zones?
Great question. Housing is a market that we are starting to break into. Part of that is actually coming from strategic partnerships with other firms that are already doing that work. If you have not heard of Mithun Architects, they are an incredible group. They're based out of the Bay Area, but they also have an office in Seattle. Another great group is David Baker and Associates. They're also in the Bay Area dealing with affordable housing. But for me personally, one of the reasons why I do think housing is, of course, not just in great need, I think the dignity of space is something that has sort of fallen by the wayside a little bit, especially when it comes to sort of living, familial sort of living, right? Like a lot of us kind of just make do with what we have, or in some cases, we don't have the resources to have more than what we have. So for me, that's one thing that I feel is really important is designing for that. But also, you know, I am a firm believer that the affordable housing market, a lot of it is driven by pro formas and making sure you can hit your bottom line and working with all the developers and all those sorts of things, which is, it's great that there is a sort of system in place to help that happen. But I do feel sometimes that the people that it's actually going to serve are not empowered in the process, and that's something that Just is looking to do more of. So we've actually partnered with Mithun and David Baker to start to find ways to do that in their process. So we're kind of working in stealth mode behind the scenes with them to start to explore what that might look like.
How would you take?
No, keep going.
Because you're defining the process, and that's what you're working on tomorrow, is defining the process. How would you take that process across the country in all of the different areas, so that every area is in need?
Good question. First, I'm a firm believer that process is really a framework. As much as we can have ourselves and identity present in what we are doing, if it's too rigid, it's going to start excluding stuff, right? But if it's a framework that's a little bit more available to sort of adapt, so I think that's one thing, is maybe getting out of our own ways a little bit to be a bit more comfortable in tailoring process to specific contexts. And I think that's one of the other key things, is just finding ways to honor and acknowledge and empower those communities that you're working with. Because East Palo Alto is, while there are similarities that I have been seeing to St. Louis, there's wide range of other considerations. So sort of being sensitive to those contexts and allowing those to sort of inform that framework, I think can be at least a step in that direction.
How do you find the right people, the right groups to bring together,
Ooh.
coalesce?
Ooh, very good question. So on that note, the architecture profession for me, at least in the way that it's structured professionally, also is a little bit rigid. It feels right, like it's kind of formulaic at times. So when we were putting Just together, we started to think of an alternative model, right? Like rather than having a brick and mortar where everyone comes to and then you have this sort of consultant team, we created Just Collaborate. And Just Collaborate is that network of trusted leaders, experts, thinkers in different fields that we pull in a very sort of focused way from project to project. Linda is a part of that. We have an open invitation for people to also join the group. We just added somebody yesterday. But in doing so, I think it also gives clients an availability to start to see other ways and other voices to bring into the fold without necessarily having to bring on a whole consultant team and hiring off all these other sort of people. How do you find those people? You find people like Linda who believe in you and trust in you and want to connect you with people. I also think it's about sort of putting yourself out there. As much as I'm sort of standing up here, you know, talking in front of a room of people, I tend to sort of sit in the shadows and do work, and then I come out when I feel like I'm quote unquote ready. And my team was like, that's not going to work, Quinn. Like, we got to run a company here. So they have been encouraging me to get out more and more. So I think that also comes from trusting, you know, the people that you're working with to hopefully encourage and support you in that way. So, other questions? What's up, Panina?
Could you talk about what exiting looks like?
What was that?
Could you talk about what exiting communities? So I think a lot of your process involves a deep relationship building, and it's co-creative, it's eco-friendly, and you're spending so much time to them. Do you say goodbye? Can you say goodbye? Do you exit? Do you not exit?
Great question. Exiting a community. So, some of the things that first come to mind, and my operations director she continues to just be like, you cannot keep saying this. But part of our goal at Just is actually working with clients is to no longer be needed. Because we really see our objective is to equip communities and organizations and clients with the tools that they need, and collectively we co-identify to determine their own horizon, right? So in East Palo Alto in particular, Gregory, after, I don't even know, 500 hours of pro bono work in that community, organizing, speaking with people, sitting on street corners and just having conversations, he created a whole new festival called the East Palo Alto Harvest Festival. It was actually in collaboration with a developer. And it was, there was about 40 or 50 booths. It was completely community organized. And Gregory's core initiative was after this that East Palo Alto would do it on their own. And they did it on their own this year. It was the first year that they did it. It was the second year of the festival, and they successfully did it on their own this year. And it really came from us finding a way to sort of bring them into the process and help bring those sort of tools and bring that sort of drive into focus. There are some communities that we have had to sort of quote unquote exit, and I think most of that was related to policy that was outside of our quote unquote sort of control. But I am, besides like that one that's coming to mind, all of the other projects thus far, we've had some continued relationship with. It might not be at the same capacity, but it has been through sort of continued commitment to each other in that way. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's what came to mind. Others?
So I have a question, a great presentation. I have a question about the notion of apart, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are. I try to stress with the firm, or anybody really, that, and it's not my thought, it's a lot been expressed before, that there is no such thing as inside. Inside is a human construct. And so the notion of apart, to me, sort of reinforces that for me, for myself. And the reason I bring it up today is in this group is because with respect to what architects are charged with doing, so much of it is to provide shelter and so forth, but to the degree that it reinforces the notion that what we do, what we build, where we gather together is distinct from the rest of Mother Earth. I mean, I think that's pretty crazy. Our fauna and flora siblings have no inside construct. Why should we? I just wonder what your thoughts.
Oh, yeah. Interesting question. To your point about the flora and fauna, I think one of the unique things about us as people is we've sort of developed these other means of being able to exist in environments that might not normally accept us or we might not normally be comfortable in, right? And whether I'm inside my clothes or I'm wearing my clothes, right? I love that we're playing with language here. So that's just one thing, I think we as a people have leaned into that so much that we've kind of disconnected a little bit, right? Like we used to move with the seasons, and now you can go to Whole Foods and you can get guavas whenever the hell you want. So like in the middle of the desert. So there's that sort of inside-outside thing there is also sort of a construct, right? It's like, oh, I could just have the world at my fingertips, so it's so inside of my life now, right? But with regards to the built environment, it's an interesting question because that insideness is something in some cases that really does disconnect us from each other and the planet, Mother Earth, right? Like the first thing that came to mind when you asked that question was just the prison system. Like you can't really get much more inside than that. And what that does for sort of human psyche and relationship. And I think too, maybe the question that I would have back to you on that is who is the one sort of defining inside, right? If it is this construct, where is that definition coming from? It's probably from somebody who's got a lot of power and wants to hold on to it. So what does that also mean in terms of inside and outside? I'm going to reflect on this question more because it's a great one. Yeah, I love that. Others? One more. Ooh, 2 hands went up. Yes. Ooh, 3 went up. I think the other was front row. Give it to Charlene, and then there's another fellow over here. Oh, front row, here. Cam, we're coming for you, Charlene. You're next.
First of all, thank you for coming, and thank you for speaking on your experience. My question has to do with just going about how you secured the work. So you said you've worked in a lot of marginalized communities, a lot of marginalized populations. And historically, in a lot of redline neighborhoods, banks and large capital providers are hesitant to provide financing for big projects. So I was hoping you could speak a bit more on your experience on securing or even like cobbling together the funding for the projects you've been doing and how you've been able to replicate that process throughout different projects.
Awesome. Great question. The first responses we're still figuring it out. But I think, well, I think the nature of your question, one of the things that we continue to run into in our work is that this process surfaces opportunities that people hadn't really thought about. I flashed up there the Living Archive project in San Diego. The initial charge for that project was to be a civil rights center. There was zero definition of what that meant, so that our team kind of helped to come in and start to craft the program and what it was going to be serving and all of that. But out of that engagement, the Living Archive was an idea that was born. And not only was it present through story, imagery, projection, those sorts of things, it was actually baked into the hardware of the building. But the software doesn't exist, right? It does, but it hasn't been sort of like collated into a thing. People might have some memorabilia here, somebody might have a story over there, somebody might be aging out over here and needs to share something. So the Living Archive has become a new project that doesn't have funding. And this has happened on 4 or 5 other projects too. So, since we kept running into this issue and there was need, we created Just Act. And that is our nonprofit arm to help catalyze these grassroots underserved projects that are in this need, that are running into that sort of capital pressure. At the same time, and I have to attribute this to Gregory in particular, my business partner, or collaboration partner, or brother, or clone, or whatever you want to call him, we get on the same Zoom, and if you turn our screens off, people don't know who's talking. We've kind of absorbed into the same person. He's done a lot of work working with developers and understanding that, of course, they have, in many cases, a baseline sort of community asset number or value that they have to hit. But what does that value mean? That's what Gregory's been doing a lot of work of with developers, is reframing community value. And the Harvest Festival I mentioned earlier was paid from a developer. There was no money. And they rallied like $300,000 or something to do it. Originally, they thought it was going to be like $20K. But Gregory, being Gregory, expanded it into this thing. And where I think that really came from was it came from a lot of work helping the developer understand that this financial investment was way more than that. This was showing the community that they were showing up for them in a meaningful way by getting out of the way and helping sort of scaffold this opportunity. So I think a lot of it might then also come, just reflecting on Gregory's sort of successes in reframing value and what that means with developers, and in other cases, going out and finding ways to make it happen on your own, which has not been an easy thing to do, but somebody's got to do it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Hello, Charling.
Hi, Quinn. So in the spirit of, you started the presentation, like reflecting about your grandparents, like the past, and then looking into the future. So if we take now as a midpoint, and you reflect 10 years ago where you were at, I'm curious to what you envision what Just is going to evolve to in 10 years.
Ooh. So Charling and I go way back. 10 years back, at least, I guess you could say. At Y, the firm that I had mentioned earlier. Great question, Charling. So 10 years, where and what is Just doing? I believe that in 10 years, the Just Collaborate network will have grown to involve and incorporate incredible folks that I know are out in the audience today. I also believe that we will continue to follow our decentralized model. We do not have a brick and mortar. We have a team of about 12 people, and we are international. All of our work is done primarily through digital collaboration tools. But the reason why we structured it that way also was because we wanted to get a pulse on inequities outside of America and get a bit of a sense of what else was going on in the world. So I would imagine that network definitely continues to grow. I have been very inspired by Mass Design Group. Their model and the work that they're doing is very much the direction that I feel Just is starting to sort of go in. I would love to be doing more memorials and more places of memory and liberation and celebration. And I'm also very interested in regenerative tourism. I think tourism in general is a serious issue that affects like inequity across the board, whether it's like the carbon debt you have in flying somewhere, and then when you land there, like what your impact has on that community, and being conscientious of that, and starting to design developments that really coexist and support the health and well-being of the planet in a sort of healing standpoint. I'm very interested in doing that at scale. We're talking with a developer right now for a project down in the Bahamas. It's about 200 acres to do a regenerative sort of tourist development, which has been very exciting. We're hopeful it's going to happen. But I see us starting to kind of go in that direction as well. And I would really, I think the other sort of key part of this is I love doing this, like being with you all and hearing stories and knowing that, or hoping that some of what we've talked about today might stick with you and go somewhere else, and pollinating through sort of education. I would love to not step away from just, but like, hey guys, you got this. I'm going over to this school to do this, or I'm going over to this school to do this. I think I get that from my grandmother too, Judith. She was an educator. So I'm hopeful that we can create new sort of education and learning platforms as well. I hope somebody recorded that, because my operations director needs to hear all of that. Yeah, that's what comes to mind.
Thank you.
I think there was one more over here, maybe? Two more over here? Yes, they keep coming!
I don't know if I have any questions. I taught band for 31 years and retired, and am just enjoying coming to these lectures. I love building. I love architecture.
Did you say band?
Band, yeah.
Nice.
And you are an educator.
Thank you. I'm also a band member, trombone, baritone, contrabass.
All right.
Marching band.
I had a music recommendation. As a fellow lover of Prince,
yes.
Jose James put out a new album called 1978.
Okay.
And one of my former students is playing drums on it. But he grew up in Minneapolis, and you'll get that 78 vibe and a little taste of Prince in there.
Jose James, right?
Yep.
Nice. Love the recommendation. Thank you. I think this is the last question, maybe?
This has been fabulous.
We can hear you.
Okay.
You have to use a deep Barry White voice.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Deeper.
I'm sorry. One of the things, I've been involved in environmental stuff for a long time in energy, and one of the things that I keep stumbling across or stumbling over are my built-in perceptions that deceive me. For instance, when you look at, right now I'm standing still. The planet is rotating at 1,000 miles an hour. We're orbiting the sun at 50,000 miles plus an hour. The sun is circling the galaxy at over 500,000 miles an hour. I'm just wondering, because these things keep astonishing me, have you run into where your perceptions need to keep evolving? And what are some of the more startling ones that you've felt you've dealt with?
Ooh, what's your name?
Tim.
Tim. Thank you, Tim. Great question. I also felt the speed of our rotation as you were saying that. It's good. Great question. So one of the key, so I'll start at the beginning. I believe that community engagement, or any sort of engagement, has to start with how you see yourself in the engagement that you are doing. You could just show up and be like, oh, I'm going to come into this room and we're going to do this thing, right? But if you aren't aware of your position relative to the work you're doing, those preconceptions can show up in a very, very prominent way, sometimes with you not even knowing, right? So what I'm kind of getting at is, I think it's important for anyone working with a community or in a context that might not be familiar to you to take a step back and really keep and hold close to heart how am I showing up? Am I an advocate? Am I an ally? Am I a steward? Am I all three of those? Am I a co-conspirator? Co-conspirator is something that is very real, right? And it's not like conspiring in the background behind the scenes. A co-conspirator is that you've got skin in the game. You're right in there with them, and you're putting something on the line, right? And you might not be comfortable doing that, and that's okay. That's totally fine. But when you're able to sort of understand your position, then I think you have a great opportunity to take an even further step back and ask yourself, what biases am I carrying into this experience? I do that before. I did it before I walked in this room today. I went and stepped outside. I took a few minutes to myself. And I was like, all right, what biases do I got here? What am I dealing with, right? And I think that process is something that I would encourage everyone to do outside of design, within design, is to really wholeheartedly give into that space of understanding how you are showing up. I think it's really important for all of us to do, especially as division gets more and more potent and we're getting put on either side of the freeway or the tracks. That's going to continue to happen, and as those in power continue to get questioned, that's going to happen even more and more. There's, it's been going on for so long, and I saw Angela Davis speak in San Francisco about 6 months ago. It's wildly inspiring, as I'm sure you would imagine. Somebody in the audience asked her at the end, they said, you've seen so much, you've done so much, what has changed? What's changed? Can you tell us? What do you think has changed? And she says, child, a lot has changed, but nothing's changed. And that's going to stick with me forever. And I think in knowing that, hearing that come from her, being on the front lines, we have to continue to do that for ourselves and the people and the context that we exist in. Is what's my position here? What's my role? What am I carrying? So that's what you got from me, Tim.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.